Welcome back to Workingman's Pod. I'm Alex. This is Dave. We're here today to talk about Dave's Picks Volume 47, a show recorded at the Kiel Auditorium in St. Louis, Missouri on December 9th, 1979. Welcome, Dave.
Welcome back. We got to get back in full episode shape here.
I know. Well, it's interesting because we have this one and then we will do one more from the vault, I think we said, and then get back into the full swing of things. So it's a little bit of a tease almost, but that's all right. Thank you to everyone who listened to our first From the Vault episode. It's gotten like fantastic listenership, which is great. I think that kind of confirms our theory that we had a lot of new joiners on the bus during the Dead and Company tour. And so we really appreciate you guys sticking around after that tour has now concluded and listening to our Grateful Dead content. So we are talking about an official release today. Of course, if you don't have that release, unfortunately, they don't make the Dave's Pick series available on streaming, but this show is widely available on really wherever you listen to your Grateful Dead odds and soundboards and whatnot. So you can go find it and listen along to what I think is a really good show. High level, Dave, what's your thought about this show?
It's high energy for sure. I think that both set one and set two take a little time to ease in. It's kind of like some cold water, but then once you're in, man, it gets hot near the end of both sets.
Nice. Well, we are going to get all the way into it in just a sec, but before we do, let's get into the days between.
There were days, there were days, and there were days between.
Do you want to go first today with your days between?
Well, quite literally days between, because we put out our From the Vault ep on Jerry's birthday, which is, the start of the days between. And we are recording this on the penultimate day of the days between. So we just been like in it for real. Which is the first time in our podcast's history that's happened. For me, just last full week of work. So I'm about to enter vacation mode for about 35 days. And then if anyone knows anyone who needs a Grateful Dead themed lawyer, hit me up.
Or otherwise, if you don't need a Grateful Dead thematic lawyer, if you just need a regular one, that's also fine. Dave is a barred attorney. So, well, that's nice. I hope that you'll get to do some relaxation and enjoy some nice tunes, maybe a concert in your days between jobs.
Absolutely. What about you?
So for me, unfortunately, the band's name appears to be gone from their website, which I'm very sad about. But my days between, and if you are a new joiner, then I'll just tell you, the days between is kind of Dave and I noticed a long time ago that we were having Grateful Dead related things popping up in our time between recording episodes. And so we wanted to have a little space to kind of talk about it and say what sorts of heady, random things had happened to us. The one that happened to me is that my wife and I were walking out of a movie, probably, I guess we started at like 3:30. When we were coming out around 6, there was a band playing in kind of this central area outside of the movie theater. It's kind of like a gathering place. So a bunch of people had chairs set up and stuff like that. And we knew that they did these Sunday or Saturday night shows. When we walked out, this band was playing Fire on the Mountain. And
Oh, very cool.
that was delightful. They were playing a great rendition of it too. They had a female vocalist who was just doing a great job. Their drummer was doing some really interesting stuff he had like chimes next to his drum set, and he was kind of working on those during the chorus, which sounded really cool. Unfortunately, the band's name is no longer on the website for the place that we saw them. They only have the events from August, and this was the last day of June that we saw this happen. So I can't give them proper credit. I'm very sorry about that. But if you know of a band in the greater Durham, North Carolina area that has a pretty eccentric catalog, because when we heard them play 2 other songs, neither were like Dead related or jammy or even like classic rock. One was a Bruno Mars song, for example. Then maybe you can write us and we can give them a proper shout. But it's always nice to just stumble into a random Grateful Dead performance out in the world.
Oh, yeah. One more little thing that happened is that you and I are accidentally wearing matching shirts today for this, which is
True.
just both comical and embarrassing.
Well, it's actually going to be my second Days Between thing, which is that our friend Howard Weiner, whose book we're both wearing a T-shirt of, The Grateful Pilgrimage, available now on Amazon and at Howard's website. Howard just launched his own Grateful Dead podcast called Deadology, where he's talking about different Grateful Dead shows. He and I had a nice conversation last week. He had a couple questions about kind of how to get it up and running, but it's now available wherever you get your podcasts, I believe. I found it on Apple and on Spotify earlier today. So it's available. I think the site that he's using to host it puts it out everywhere. So go check out Deadology. The name is inspired and named after one of his various books about the Grateful Dead. He has Deadology volumes 1 and 2. You can go pick both of those up on Amazon too while you're at it. So shout out to Howard. It's another fun way to engage with the Grateful Dead is to listen to Howard's podcast and hear all the things that he gets into when it comes to the Dead. His first episode is about a show in 1982 at Alpine Valley. So Howard digs into kind of what was going on in that show and what his trip to Wisconsin was like to go see the Grateful Dead in 1982. So those are the Days Between. On that note, I think let's get on with the show.
It's gonna get stranger. Let's get on with the show. Let's go.
79. This is new for us.
It is Sunday, 12/9/79 at the Kiel Auditorium in St. Louis, aka the City of Blues, if you will. What's going on in 1979? We've never talked about this year, I believe.
I don't think so.
I don't think
Right?
we have either. So, yeah, I mean, it's a year that through the fault purely of my own, I'm not super well versed in. I'm wondering if you are before we get into anything further about this show.
Nope. I got nothing.
It feels like
nothing pre-research on 79. It's not like a year that I was like, like 1969, for example. I just know that's when the moon landing happened. I know that that's like a big year in the history books, but 79, I got like one big thing and that's it. And that was from doing research.
I mean, I've got nothing from it, but I meant more specifically for the Grateful Dead. Like, are you well versed in like the Dead 79 playing and history?
I'm not. I just know that this has got to be like the first full year of Brent, right? And
Not
so
even.
they're not even. So they've got to be like getting their feet wet with him.
Yeah. So I think that's why this is a bit of a blind spot in my Dead history, my own Deadology, if you will. I think there are a couple of reasons why I have kind of missed this year. So first of all, the God shows have departed as of December of 79. Their final show, Keith and Donna's, was on February 17th of 79. And Brent's first show with the band was on April 22nd of 1979. So he joined the band midstream in the year. He had been playing with Bobby a little bit before that, but he joined the Grateful Dead this year. The God shows left the band this year. So it's a bit of an in-between year. The other thing is there are no like big tentpole types of events in 79. When you go through the previous years, in 78, you have Egypt. In 77, you have the Spring 77 tour. 76, you have their first full year back from the hiatus. 75 is the hiatus itself. So the few shows that we have from that year, most notably one from the Vault, are kind of have that extra sheen to them. 74, inverse, the last year before the hiatus. So there's some memorable stuff going on there. 73, well known for, among other things, Watkins Glen. 72, you have Europe 72. I mean, it goes on, so on and so forth. There are like things every year throughout the 70s, which I think is the Dead's most beloved decade as a live band, at least among the heads. And so it's interesting that 79, the big event is Brent joining. And I think that I honestly had just kind of slept on that. I really like the Brent era of the Grateful Dead, but for me, it's always been like the late 80s that I've kind of tended toward, 87 to 90, really, for whatever reason. So this year, admittedly, was a bit of a blind spot for me, but I really liked what I heard from this show. And it sounds like you also did not have a storied past with 79.
No, none whatsoever. Not for the Dead.
All right. So with that in mind, what was going on in the outside of the Grateful Dead? What's going on in kind of pop culture and music in 1979? The top album in the land this week in 1979 on December 9th was The Long Run by the Eagles. It was their follow-up to Hotel California, and this album unseated In Through the Outdoor by Led Zeppelin on November 3rd, and then kept this top spot on the Billboard charts for the last 9 weeks of the year. The enduring hits from this album are The Long Run and I Can't Tell You Why. I think those are the two from this album that you might still hear on classic rock radio. The top Billboard song in the land is Babe by Styx. It's in the middle of a 2-week run at the top spot. And the song of the year was My Sharona by the Knack. Only 6 weeks. Yeah.
Good one.
6 weeks at number one. So interestingly, I always hated that song. I thought it was really cheesy. And
yeah, it is a little bit.
And it's also just like repetitive to me. But my mother-in-law gave me a bunch of her old vinyls. And part of the agreement that we made was I could do whatever I wanted with them after I'd listened to all of them once. So like once I listen to it, I can feel free to give it away, to sell it, whatever. And when I listened to that one, I realized that there's a really great guitar solo in the middle of My Sharona that is not in the radio version. I have no idea why.
Oh, that's interesting.
It kind of brings the whole song together. And shout out to my friend John, who also pointed that out to me. That he was like, I don't know why they cut this solo out, because it's actually a good song with the solo in it, but without it, it's just kind of like such like basic pop radio fodder. There's not really much to it. So I don't know why they did that. I guess that was kind of what was selling at that point in time. Longer songs were not in at all. So I don't know. Maybe you disagree with me, Dave. Maybe you disagree with me, masses. But never my favorite song. But with the solo, it's kind of more interesting. So I'd encourage you guys all to go check that out and see if you agree, if you disagree. Birthdays on December 9th. Author John Milton, a very long time ago. Actor Kirk Douglas, and actually a lot of actors. Red Fox, Dame Judi Dench, John Malkovich, and musicians Donny Osmond and Imogen Heap.
And I had drummer Trey Cool from Green Day. One of those musicians.
I've always loved that name. Trey Cool.
Yeah.
The double entendre aspect of it too in French.
Very cool. Yeah.
I'm a big fan. So, all right. We've already kind of talked about this year in Grateful Dead history. As I said, the biggest event of the year. Well, actually, Dave, before I get into that, you said that you had some other events from the history in 1979. What did you find?
Backing up, can I go to December 9th, 1935?
Please.
On this day in history. The Downtown Athletic Club Trophy, later renamed the Heisman Trophy, gets awarded for the first time. You're not going to guess who got it. So Jay Berwanger from what school?
Jay Berwanger. I mean, Yale. I have no idea.
That you're not like out of the ballpark. University of Chicago, which I thought was very interesting.
I don't even know if they still have a football team.
Right. The big event from 79. On this very day, December 9th, 1979, scientists confirmed that the eradication of the smallpox virus, it's done. Humans beat the virus.
Amazing. Great job not us, but us collectively, the royal us.
Right.
Yeah. It's crazy. That and polio for a long time, at least.
Right. Polio's back, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Smallpox is still, well, now I guess it would be the only one that we've beaten for good.
Yeah. Nice job by us. So that's the big event in the history of 1979. Otherwise, not a ton seemingly going on that year, to be honest. Obviously everyone, especially in December of 79, is excited about the dawn of the 80s. But, in many ways, the 80s were already there. I mean, when you kind of look at the big things that would be happening throughout the 80s, the things that I guess you could say defined the 80s largely. You have like cocaine, number one, and especially like the crack quote unquote epidemic, and like the whole Nancy Reagan just say no era. You have the massive explosion of like wealth on Wall Street, especially. before the 80s and before the movie Wall Street, bankers were like the nerdy people in your town who were kind of dorky and made a fine living. And then after the movie Wall Street came out, now bankers, like Wall Street investment bankers, are the richest people in the world. That stuff is already kind of in the water in 79, especially cocaine. That is really going on in 79.
In the water, in the air, and in the dirt. It's everywhere.
Everywhere you go. So also the music of 79, when we talk about it, Styx and My Sharona, if I hadn't told you, you would have thought both of those were 80s songs. But December 79.
Yeah, Styx for sure.
Yeah. So, and even I can't tell you why. That song sounds a bit 80s-ish. I mean, I don't know. I guess that's kind of a tweener. Whereas the album that was at the top of the charts before The Long Run, In Through the Outdoor, I feel like that's a definitively 70s album. So we're kind of straddling the decades at that point in time, I think. So it's kind of interesting. It's kind of how people talk about the 2000s didn't really start in 2000. They started in 2001 with 9/11, because that's when things really got like weird and the defining issue of that decade began. It's not always as tidy as saying like, 1980 began, this new era. Oftentimes it's not that simple. But anyways, back to 79 with the Dead. It's interesting. There are not many live releases from this year. This is the sixth release from 1979. All are from October or later. So none of those last Donna and Keith shows. None of the early Brent shows. It's all from the end of the year. Once I think Brent was more in the groove at that point. I would just have to guess, because he had, it's an improvisational band where you're kind of getting used to how the other musicians perform. You kind of have to get used to how they play. So you have 3 Road Trips releases, 1 Dave's Picks, volume 31, which is from December 3rd, and 1 Dick's Picks, volume 5, from December 26th of 1979. And now this one. So yeah, not a year that's been super well covered. This tour was a 10-show run. It began on November 29th, which was a Thursday, in Cleveland, and then 2 nights in Pittsburgh that weekend, Friday and Saturday. 3 nights midweek at the Uptown Theater in Chicago, Illinois, night 3 of which we have a sampling of, night 2 of which we have a sampling of at the end of disc 3 of this release. Then we had 1 night in Indianapolis, 1 night in St. Louis, and 2 nights in Kansas City to close out the smaller tour.
Little Midwest run.
Yeah, little Midwest run to kind of largely close out their performances in 79. This is also in between the release of 2 albums. No Grateful Dead studio release came in 1979. We had Shakedown Street on November 15th, 1978. That was their second record back at Arista Records, the first being Terrapin Station. And then the third at Arista is Go to Heaven, which was released 4 months after this show in April of 1980. So you get some songs from both albums during this show, and you can tell that they're kind of enjoying those songs around this period of time. The venue. So by my count, the Dead played 31 shows in St. Louis. There is a phenomenal Good Old Grateful Dead cast episode about kind of the connection between St. Louis and the Dead, and about how there's a time where the Dead talked about opening up a second, basically, headquarters in St. Louis because they loved it there so much. Yeah, they had a huge fan base. It was the largest producer city-wise of acid outside of San Francisco in the country. So there was a lot of headiness there, and a lot of people who were interested in seeing them, and also a great place in the middle of the country for them to kind of use as a launching point for tourists rather than San Francisco having to fly all the way across the country to start a tour in New York or Boston or something like that.
Yeah, and that fits with the aesthetic of St. Louis, which it's literally the gateway to the West, right? Have you ever been to the Arch?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Arch is pretty neat.
Yeah, it's cool to see. So they've played 12 shows at this specific venue at the Kiel Auditorium, one earlier in 1979, February 11th of this year. The first time played there was in 1969, and the last time played there was 1982. So it's kind of interesting. It really kind of spans not the whole length of the band's time. But I mean, I'll say this: the first time they played there included a Cryptical Envelopment and closed with We Bid You Good Night. And the last time they played there opened with Feel Like a Stranger and included a CC Rider. So very,
Wow.
very different bands.
Yeah. Whoa.
Yeah. So it's funny, in the Listen to the River box set that came out 2 years ago, the first 5 shows were at the Fox Theater in St. Louis. And then the last 2 were at the Kiel Auditorium. It's 71, 72, and 73. And in 72, Phil kind of lectures the crowd and he's like,
while we're testing our monitors, there might be something that could be said about trying to be nice to this place. In other words, don't stand on the seats or kick in the walls or rip out the ornaments. Seeing as how this is the only place we like to play around here. And if we can't come back here to this theater, we won't come back to this town, which means you'll have to go to Kiel Auditorium and listen to Grand Funk Railroad. So consider it.
so I think that they did like playing the Fox a little bit better, a more intimate vibe than the 10,500 capacity Kiel Auditorium. Great location for this venue, though. It's smack dab in downtown St. Louis, just about 3 blocks from Busch Stadium, which, Dave, as you know, is like right next to the Arch. You know, that's right in the heart of the city. Formerly the home of the St. Louis University Billikens and the St. Louis Hawks, now Atlanta Hawks of the NBA. This was a really kind of big venue in its heyday. Based on the info that I could find, it only hosted about 12 to 15 concerts a year, in addition to lots of sports, most notably wrestling. So I'm not a big wrestling fan, but I know that people who are talk about St. Louis wrestling, that like St. Louis wrestlers had their own vibe. And before WWF originally kind of consolidated all of the wrestling of the country and brought it all under one big kind of tent, there were just different little wrestling syndicates all around the country. St. Louis, famously the home of Ric Flair, was a huge one. There's a ton of really big wrestling in St. Louis. So this was a big home to that. There's also attached to this building is the Kiel Opera House. So the front part of the building was the Opera House, and that has been rehabilitated and remains open today as the Stifel Theater. I don't know if I pronounced that correctly. Apologies if I did not. But when the auditorium was open, the Opera House was the front half, the auditorium was the back half, and they could be simultaneously used because the stages were back to back with the audiences on either side of the building. So the acoustics wouldn't basically get messed up. I guess there's one thing.
Very cool.
I know it is. It's a really cool way to kind of maximize the space that you have, and to be able to have 2 events going at the same time, I think. I guess there's a big famous event here where Dwight Eisenhower spoke, and they found some way to bring down the wall in between so that he could speak kind of in the round and just speak to people on both sides, which is kind of cool. Other events that I can find here, the earliest concert I can find a record of, this venue was opened in April of 1934 and then kept going until April of 91. It was demolished shortly thereafter. The earliest show I can find, though, is from 1958, a Buddy Holly concert on April 15th. Some really big shows after that, though. Not only do you have all the Grateful Dead shows, June 1st, 1969, The Who, with a couple of small opening bands you may have heard of, Led Zeppelin and Joe Cocker. That would have been a monster show.
Damn, yeah.
The 1981 Rappers Convention, featuring the Sugar Hill Gang and Grandmaster Flash. Kind of cool. Very early days of hip hop. And the latest in time show that I could find was Kiss in 1990. So, this building saw a lot. Now, since it's been demolished, it was replaced by a building that's called the Enterprise Center, which is now the home of the St. Louis Blues. So that is the history of the building. We talked about the tour. We talked about the year in Grateful Dead history. All that's left to do is get into the music.
Well, it is a Dave's pick, so I think we maybe could also talk about the box, the CD.
Yeah. Did you like it?
And I did like it. I mean, red is one of my favorite colors, so the prominence of the red cardinal like flying around all over, I did like. And then they are on, I'm guessing here, like I imagine that the stone bear was outside the Kiel Auditorium. I don't know.
Correct. Yep.
Okay.
And in the background,
and the Cardinals are flying around the bear.
Yep. In the background, you can see these big pillars, which is the facade, like the front of the Kiel Auditorium. This big bear statue was outside in the front as well. I'm not sure if it's still there. It might be. But it was back in the heyday. And then, yeah, like you said, Cardinals flying around with one very prominent in the middle of the picture, Phoenix, rising up. I think that's kind of cool. So in the background of that, like behind the bear statue and even kind of creeping around the front of it, you have these bushes with orange and yellow flowers, which seems to be this artist's kind of aesthetic, because the last one it was a very floral pattern in the front, which I thought was cool. And then on the inside of the album, you have a big picture of the band setup. It's interesting because it's 79. So you have Jerry on the left part of the stage, then Bob, and then Phil and Brent on the right side with the drummers and their kind of, one of the initial drum setups, like the big drums rig behind them, which looks great. The album notes were kind of interesting. Dave Lemieux talked about how they had thought about holding off on releasing anything from this tour, thinking about maybe a bigger release, like a box set. But they knew that they wanted to do something from the earlier Brent era for this release, and they had been kind of circling this show for a long time, and now was the time. And I think they made a great decision. So now, talked about the album cover, talked about everything else. Let's get into it, shall we?
Now I think we can get on down to Alabama.
32 teeth in a jawbone, Alabama trying to numb. Before I have to hit him, I hope he got the sense to run.
All right, so that was the show opening song, Alabama Getaway. One of those Go to Heaven songs that I mentioned are on this show. I think Alabama Getaway is the first track on. Yeah, it is. It's the first track on that album.
I think so, yeah.
Brent is noticeable, like off the rip. Like before they even get into the song, you can hear him, and like you can tell that it's Brent. I think just like him, kind of warming up his fingers on the keys.
So can I do one big picture mini complaint before we dive into everything?
Yeah.
So the beginning of this release, did you ever like fuck around with your parents' audio settings in their old car? Not like an old car, but like the car when you were a kid,
like treble and stuff.
Right. We had a 2000 Honda Odyssey growing up with like all the big buttons and wheels that you could push for audio. The beginning of this sounds like you took just what you said, the treble, and just cranked it all the way up, because you can hear Brent so clear. You can hear one of the guitarists and they kind of fluctuate, and then you can hear the cymbals. And that's like kind of it for a little bit. And then throughout the discs, there's like an inconsistency on who's mixed high and low. But when it comes together, like when the mixes come together just right, those songs are like powerhouses. But they're scattered throughout. And unfortunately, I do think it's a little more prominent than not, are inconsistently mixed, and not sloppy, not like they did a bad job mixing it. They did the best they could with, what is this, 44-year-old tapes?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, the fact that we're getting it is excellent and great. But in particular, at the beginning of Alabama Getaway, it's like, oh my God, Brent, like I can't hear anybody else.
Well, I do think that, to be just completely fair to all of the master people, like the people who do the mastering, I know Jeffrey Norman is someone that Dave Lemieux always gives a shout out to. And I'm not exactly sure who taped this show now that I think about it. But in any case, I do think that part of it is also especially the cymbals thing you're talking about, is that Bill and Mickey were in love with the cymbals on this show. They were doing so much on the cymbals. Like it is very noticeable. And I'll just say this as like another, it's not a complaint. It's just the nature of, this band sometimes. I don't think this is a particularly great night for the drummers, to be honest. I think that they are fine, and there are times when they really find it and they're really locked in, but I would not say that this is like, their best work.
I completely agree. Yep.
So with that being said, I do still really like this show. And part of it, I mean, with the, troubles that you talked about aside, I do really enjoy this Alabama Getaway. I think that the solo that he busts out in the beginning, it concludes around 2:15, is really
Brent.
Yeah, Brent
Yeah.
is very, very good. And then less than a minute later, he's into another really good solo. And Jerry uses that second one as a launching pad to get into some early theatrics of his own, which I thought was really good. But my most favorite part about this song is the rip roaring transition out and into Promised Land.
100%. But I'm listening to this for the first time. Those complaints are forming in my head. And then this like slide right into Promised Land. I was like, whoa, yep, you got me. I was
Yeah.
wrong.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, that transition is tremendous, and it's a sign of things to come because they have a few really, really good ones throughout this show. And then after that transition, Jerry just keeps the beat string growing and growing from Alabama to Missouri and then into someplace sublime beyond there. I mean, it's just excellent. Phil is very emphatic. He's not like dropping bombs. It's just that he's playing with emphasis and it sounds really great. I love Phil's playing on Promised Land. So this kind of 1-2 combo of Alabama Getaway into Promised Land, I think they're a fitting 1-2. And I really like the way that they sound together. And I really like kind of, like you said, I think it's a bit hard to hear Bobby in the mix on these two songs. And the drummers, you're mostly hearing cymbals, but Brent and Jerry and Phil, I think, are just playing so well on this opening duo.
Yeah, I completely agree about Bob. And that's what's noticeable about the next song, Brown Eyed Women. That's the first time like I could finally hear him.
Mm-hmm.
And the way he's working with Jerry, especially at the beginning, was really, really good. And I noted it. I was like, oh, finally, there's Bob.
Yeah. Yeah. So Bob comes in, you're right, in a big way on Brown Eyed Women. This is a good Brown Eyed Women. It's about 6 minutes long. I really like Brent's playing too. It's very dreamy. And I really like what he's bringing to the vocal mix in this song.
Me too. I love Brent as a backup vocalist. Like 80s Samson and Delilah's. I adore for his backup vocaling, backup singing, I guess is the right word. And yeah, same. I love him when he just like wails away in support of Jerry.
Yeah, I agree. And in support of Bobby. They have good vocal chemistry. And I know that they had been playing together a little bit before Brent joined the band, so it makes sense. But like those two do sound very good together. And Brent and Jerry together as backing vocalists also sound really good. Like all of these guys just sound great together. I guess that there were some people in the beginning who were very skeptical of Brent joining the band. I would think that probably would have been resolved pretty quickly in his time. Because I mean, this is less than 8 months in, and he already sounds great. And I mean, also he's already playing his own songs. Like later in this set, we get Easy to Love You. So I mean, he made himself a member of the band really quickly, and I think he deserves a lot of credit for that. So yeah, what else do you have about Brown Eyed Women? I didn't have much. I just thought it was, kind of a fine version of a song that we like a lot.
One thing I did notice is that Jerry was doing like hesitation notes throughout, both while playing the guitar and then also like singing on the mic. He was waiting on the at the upbeat, I guess it's called the and beat, like not the downbeat, not the beginning of the note, but near the end of the note. And then he would like emphasize that with playing or like on the mic. It sounds like he's waiting that extra half second to sing. That's something that I noticed, that he's having fun and tweaking a little bit, a song that at this point in their career they've probably played like 400 times and would play another 400.
So next song is Cassidy. 5 minutes and 32 seconds. I saw that runtime and I was expecting this to be like a really kind of tight Cassidy, but it's much more complex and jammy than I was expecting. I think this is a very, very good version of this song. And it's Bob sounds good on Promised Land, but he kind of messes up some of the lyrics. This one is a very strong vocal performance, and I think it's a sign of things to come with the way that he's singing throughout this show. He's got a lot of heart in his singing, I think, on this night, and you can really feel it in Cassidy. But there's also just some really good and kind of deep jamming going on. I thought this was a very good first set, Cassidy.
This was the first song where I thought you could kind of hear Phil a little bit better and hear what he was bringing. So I liked it in that regard. I wasn't really passionate about this Cassidy. I do agree with what you said, though. When I saw the runtime, I was like, oh, they're going to go real hot, real quick. And it kind of jammed out a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. Well, God, speaking of jammed out, then there's a 12 minute and 33 second long Road Jimmy.
Yes, here we go.
So it's interesting. The next two songs are Road Jimmy, a song that I have declared my love for many times on this show. And then after that, New Minglewood Blues, which we haven't talked about in so long. And that is, that's one of your jams. So I think we can kind of each take the floor for a minute and talk about our songs. I'll start with Road Jimmy. I think that this was played at what?
Oh, I said bring it on.
Oh, okay. So I think this is played at a very stately pace. They're not in any rush to let Jimmy row. They are really taking their time and enjoying this song. The very kind of slippery sounding slide guitar that Jerry's working with is just a delight. I really, really liked it a lot.
That's my favorite part of the song too, was that slide guitar.
Yeah. The problem with this song is the drummers don't always have it. 12 minutes and 33 seconds at this odd backbeat is a tough thing to do, I think. And especially if there are some intoxicants in the mix, potentially, that would also harm one's ability to do that. And there are some times when I think they really kind of lose that beat a little bit. So I hate to say it, but this is not my favorite Road Jimmy. I thought that this was okay, but I didn't think it was a great version. But I did think that the slide guitar from Jerry was great. And I think that, Phil, I don't know. I've never been like, Phil is what makes Road Jimmy. That's never been a thing that I've thought.
Right. Yeah,
so
yeah.
I didn't particularly notice him for better or for worse during this performance. The real thing that stood out to me was Jerry's slide.
I thought it was a really strong last 3 minutes of music. I thought it was a very not spectacular first 9 minutes of music.
I think that's fair.
So I think that the song that comes next was a little bit better 9 minutes of music. I actually don't know if it's 9 minutes, but
close.
I'm gonna check that out right now. Yeah.
Tell me everything. I literally took no notes. I figured you'd have this covered on New Minglewood.
Sure. Yeah. So what'd you think of the like country twang rather than the bluesy crunch at the beginning, which was weird to me because we're in a city known for its blues music and we were getting a little country.
Yes, but on Shakedown Street, the album, there was all New Minglewood blues at the end of that record. And so I think that that's kind of the preferred arrangement that they're playing it with in this era. So it didn't like shock or appall me, but I don't know. I thought I enjoyed the sound of it. I know that you are a bluesy New Minglewood blues person, as the title would indicate. I don't think that you're, out on a limb for that. So is this countrified?
It's not a complaint. It's just more like interesting to know. It was, it's fun and different and I enjoyed it. I was not a complaint. What else was fun and interesting was like finally you could hear Phil not just like join the mix, but actually rip through the mix. Mm-hmm. And it was like, finally, we're getting some bass like shuddering in my ears. It's about damn time. Yeah. And speaking of ringing through your ears, Brent is like nowhere to be found for the first 3 minutes. And then he's like, oh shit, it's my turn for a solo. And he comes in, he breaks down the door. It's like the Kool-Aid man barged through the wall and just like exploded into your ear. And I thought that this was the turn on this first disc from kind of an just okay show to like now we're getting hot. So this is what I call this. We have entered the powerhouse run.
Yeah, you're definitely right about that.
Yeah, and this is the diving board. This is not like, I'm not here to throw praise on this as like, this is just a must-have New Minglewood. But I don't know, with like this, the Road Jimmy before it, 12 minutes of a slower jam, the kind of lack of Phil in the mix before this, the lack of like strong bass and Bob being inconsistent. This was the first song where it was like, Okay, here we go.
Yeah, definitely. I agree that that Brent kind of brings the heat, and you have long told us that it's the keys that make a Minglewood what it can be. So I'm not shocked to hear you say that that was kind of where it started to turn. But yeah, man, the next and last four songs of the first set, banger after banger after banger after banger, all killer, no filler. The next song is Candyman. This is not a song that I'm ever going to tell you is like my favorite Grateful Dead song. You know, it's not even really a song that when I see it on a set list, I frankly perk up that much because it's kind of pretty typically like a pretty steady and stable song. Like I can't tell you like, oh, my favorite version of Candyman is this, or like my favorite era of Candyman
Right.
is, 71, something like that. This is a great version. Like as about as good a version as I can remember hearing. I think that it reaches a really great crescendo around like 6:45 during the last chorus. Very soulful singing, especially from Jerry and from Brent in the background. And Jerry's tone on this song is just perfect. I mean that both guitar wise and vocally. He's bringing exactly what I would ever want from the song. I think it's a phenomenal performance, and it, building off of that kind of powerful end to New Minglewood, it bridges us in from, kind of a hot song, gives you a little bit of a break of like a slower song you can maybe, do a slower dance to, and then we're back into some heat to close out the set. I think that it's great setlist construction, number one, and number two, it's just played very, very well.
You've put it perfectly. I got nothing to add. That's almost word for word my analysis of Candyman. The hot plan continues into a little Lazy Lightning supplication.
Yeah, so the two songs combined make up about 9+ minutes of music. Lazy Lightning is 3.5 on the CD track time. Really good type version, I thought. I've always kind of preferred Donna on this song, to be honest.
Yeah. There's also like one point where Bob and Jerry are singing completely different verses. I was like, are they like a little drunk still?
I didn't even notice the vocal flub, to be honest. I did notice Jerry and Brent's backing vocals during the My Lightning 2 part.
Yes, I noted that specifically as like a highlight of this.
Yeah, they sound great. It honestly made me like question, like, maybe I do like the Brent versions better. But I still think I like Donna's versions better. But I did think this was an excellent, excellent Brent era version of this song. And then we were talking about a great transition earlier. The transition into supplication is very subdued, but phenomenal. It sounds to me like a cat stretching out in a sunspot on a lazy Saturday afternoon. It's just, enjoying the space, not in any rush, doesn't have anywhere to go, any place to be, just filling it up and enjoying being there. I thought that it was an excellent transition. And then Jerry starts playing these tight little spirals of notes that kind of actually remind us where we are and what we're listening to. And that's the beginning of just a monster beat string that carries us all the way home. You get a slow burn that kind of at like, I don't know, at like 1:15, Bob and Jerry together are just playing so well. And as much as I criticized the drummers earlier, they are locked in at the beginning of this song. I think that throughout this set, when they're playing toms together, they sound better than when they start getting more in love with the cymbals. And because this is such a tom-centric song at the beginning, it just sounds cleaner to me than the cymbals. I think that there's something, maybe you're right, it's just like the way the cymbals are being recorded, it just sounds busy and not as clean. Whereas when they're on the toms, it's a very clean sound, which I love. And so I think it ends up just being a really nice version. And I will actually give a special shout out to the drummers from the 5:05 mark on this song to the end. So like the last 50 seconds, I think it's a great example of what makes Billy and Mickey so special when they're doing things together and they're playing right. Like it is like the exemplification of they are more than the sum of their arms. They're doing things that makes them sound like an octopus rather than two drummers playing drums together. So I, as you can tell, was very high on the supplication portion of this. And I thought that it was excellent and it was stuck in my head for like the week that we were getting ready for this show.
Number 84, Lazy Lightning into Supplication on Heady version. Masses liked it too.
They liked it, but they didn't love it. I'd like the masses to be a little bit higher on it. I got to be honest with you.
I'll caveat that except for Shakedown Street, there was almost nothing even on Heady version before this official release.
Wow.
So the fact that it was even there,
Speaks
there's
volumes.
there's kind of an asterisk here. Like the fact that it was even there, I don't think a lot of people knew about this show, dude.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think this is a like not very celebrated tour, and so the show wasn't as beloved as it could be. You got anything else on Supplication?
I got nothing, man. You crushed it.
Thank you. So Deal is the last song of the set, really zippy version.
Super upbeat, like quick and fun. I think it's not even close. It's Jerry's best playing of the first set. Like there are a couple note misses in Alabama Getaway and Brown Eyed Women and somewhere in Cassidy, but he didn't miss a damn note in Deal. He's dialed in. The drums, like they got very close to sneakery in the middle, and then I think they actually kind of brought it down. They didn't quite get into a bad place. They got close, and then they reined it in a little bit. And to the point I was making at the end of Lazy Lightning, this song wasn't even on Heady version the day of the release. So it has climbed from not present to number 243, but it'll keep climbing because this Deal it's everything you'd want.
And it's a really kind of nice bookend. You know, at the beginning you have kind of a rockin' Alabama Getaway, and then, you know, an early rock and roll song in Promised Land, and then you get a nice rock and roll song at the end of the set with this one, with Deal. Yeah, my only complaint about this song would just be that the drummers are not consistent with the tempo. They speed up a lot in the middle, and then, like you said, they kind of, I think, realize that they're kind of out above their skis, and they slow it down a little bit. But that's a minor complaint, and it's a credit to Jerry that he kept up with them the whole time and was able to kind of modify what he was doing to match what they were doing. And Bob and Phil too. Just, you know, signs of what great musicians they are.
Don't you let that feel you down. Don't you let that feel you down. Don't you let that feel you down. Oh no.
So that concludes disc 1. They fit the entire first set, all 10 tracks, onto one disc. And that brings us in.
Speaking of that, by the way, they fit the entire show in order, in the right way, on discs 1, 2, and 3. Yeah. They haven't done that in a while. So a round of applause for the people putting on the disc, and Dave Lemieux, come on the show. But yeah, no one's allowed to complain about the structuring because it's
there's nothing to complain
linear
about.
And perfect. Yep.
I actually had a note later on. I was going to tee you up I knew you would be really excited about that. So I will delete that note from my outline, because you're right. And it actually, as much as I have been, you know, kind of the counterpole to you on that, being like, it's not that big of a deal, Dave. It was nice. I will admit that.
It was nice. And it shows that you are allowed to split up drums in space.
That's
and
true.
Nothing bad is going to happen to you. And you can include just a space, no drums from a whole nother show, and nothing bad is going to happen to you.
I don't know if they thought something bad was going to happen to them. Like, they didn't say, like, if we do this, we're going to be subject to 7 years of bad luck or something like that. I think they just didn't want to. But I appreciate your reminding them that nothing bad would happen to them. The members of Grateful Dead Industries. So disc 2 is the beginning of set 2, and it goes through, to your point, drums. We get a cut, and then we're into space at the beginning of disc 3. That didn't bother me at all either, so I'm with you on that. I think that they can,
not at all.
I think they can keep doing that moving forward. Set 2 begins with the longest track. No, the second longest track of the show, Shakedown Street. 14 minutes and 22 seconds. This Shakedown Street is a monster. Phil bombs rattle us to our core to get the proceedings started in set 2. But for me, the high point of this song is the jam in the back half. It is very compelling. They
Are you talking
really,
about like the 8-minute mark
yes,
ish?
the like,
Same.
and then it's like 4 minutes of them jamming, or maybe even longer. It might be like 5 minutes of them jamming from there, where it's like it's shakedown adjacent, but it's very exploratory, don't you think?
I do. Yeah, this is some interesting like disco funk exploration.
Sounds
And
great.
one of the more danceable tunes of the whole release
Yeah,
in that like that field of music.
totally. I could see if you were at this show being like really kind of in a trance during that part and just enjoying the groove, getting into it, and kind of losing track of space time and, where your body ends in the show, the space that you're in begins. I thought it was a very, very nice version of Shakedown Street. And Dave Lemieux said something in I guess for this release, a Lakeside chat that kind of surprised me. He was like, this is, I think, going to be a really good one because we haven't really released that many Shakedown Streets. And I heard that and was like, we haven't released that many Shakedown Streets. But then I looked into it and I forgot to write down the number like a buffoon. But I believe, and I'm pretty sure I'm correct about this, that in the entire run of Dick's Picks releases, I believe there were only 2 Shakedown Streets of the 36.
Whoa.
Yeah. In the road trips, I found a couple more, I think 3 more maybe, but not that many. So he's right. I mean, there are not that many Shakedown Streets that have been released. Like if you search Shakedown Street on Apple Music or on Spotify, way more Dead and Company versions will show up than Grateful Dead versions because all their entire backlog is on that service now, those services. So that was interesting to me. I had not really thought about that, but it was nice to get a really good one to start the second set. And much like set 1, set 2 begins with a really nice transition. They drop into Samson like it's a warm bath at the end of this song.
Yeah. They do that note hold at the end of Shakedown, and then the drummers start kicking it for Samson. I This is where like that trebly mix kind of bothered me a little bit again because the toms they're not like super clear or even super loud really, which you kind of want at the beginning of a
You do.
Samson, right? Like you
do.
want your heart beating and rattling around in your cage because the drums are, kicking you along. And it's again, it's cymbal heavy, which it doesn't sound bad by any means, but it doesn't make you shake to your core like a good Samson should.
Yeah. There is one silver lining to that, though, and that is that you can hear Phil very clearly. He's playing a bouncy bass at the beginning of this song. He takes like a couple beats to come in, but it's really delightful, especially like around the start of the first verse. If you try to lock into what Phil's doing when the first verse starts, I just couldn't recommend it more highly. He sounds wonderful. Also, I think this is like peak Bobby singing on a Samson. Like he sounds so good on this song. Very like confident and like voluminous, I guess. His singing, I think, is great for a Samson and Delilah.
And on adding onto that point, I don't think Brent is quite there where he is yet. Like if you listen to like an 85 Samson, I mean, Brent is like
Belting
giving it his all in the background. Yeah, belting out. He's not there yet, but you're right. Bob did sound good. I would be remiss if I did not tell you that the Shakedown Street was number 54 on Heady Version and the song from this release with the most votes.
Wow. Okay. I mean, that's not shocking to me per se, but it's good to know. So we have Big Shakedown, a powerful Samson, although to your point, we can't really get the full force of it. And then the next song is High Time. It feels like they're taking a breath after opening up the set with so much power. But Jerry's singing is just pristine on this song. Much like Candyman, it's a song from an album that I love that is not my favorite song off the album. It's not one that I'm typically like, clamoring for in a show, but I really liked this. And I should have looked this up, but I'm not sure how often they played this song this early in set 2. It seemed a bit unusual to me in a surprising and interesting way. So I liked it. I thought that it was a nice performance to kind of give everyone a breath after the powerful Shakedown and Samson. And I think that this song and the next song really do give us a break before they bring like the power level back to an 11.
Yeah, you know who else loved it? The crowd. Like the first noticeable crowd cheer on the release when Jerry started singing. Like the crowd was amped up for an early set to High Time. Number 61, High Time on Heady version.
Wow. Okay, nice. So the next song is Easy to Love You, Brent Midland's song that was released on Go to Heaven. That makes it his first song with the band. I believe I looked this up, and the first time they played it was in August of 1979. So they've been playing it for a few months. They're getting used to it. I thought this was a lovely version of this song. Brent's keys are great. His singing is pristine. It's almost like he's taking care to be like a very good singer on it. Like he realizes he's the new guy and he doesn't want to mess it up.
And I think that can come across as like he's playing it safe.
Mm-hmm.
But I think what I think he was trying to do was he's like, people don't really know this song yet.
Yeah.
Like, this song hasn't been released yet. So I need it to sound good.
Yeah.
Before the studio version comes.
Get them to like it. Also, by all accounts, Brent was a very sensitive soul. He didn't really probably want people to not like one of his songs. And so, especially at this point in time, being very careful to guard it and make sure that it sounds really good when he's playing it. And it does sound really good. I thought this was a really, really nice version of this. Did this rate on Heady version at all?
Not even there, man.
Man, I mean, are there a lot of Easy to Love Yous on Heady version? I ask that because of all of the Grateful Dead songs I've ever had conversations about, I can't tell you that I've ever been like talking to someone on the lot or something, and we've been like, all right, well, what's your favorite Easy to Love You? That's never really come up, which is a shame because this is a really nice song.
It is a sweet song. There are only 14 versions on Heady version, so it doesn't even fill up a full page.
Yeah, haters in the building.
Right. I'm not offended by it not being there, but
no, me neither.
Throw it some love.
Yeah, but we should. All right, so the next song, and we get into this other like powerhouse section of the show here, is Terrapin Station. This is the longest song of the show at 14:41, so just a few seconds longer than Shakedown Street.
It's also been the longest fucking time since we talked about this great song. Do you know when the last time we talked about a Grateful Dead Terrapin Station on this program was?
I don't. Tell me.
It was the July 1978 show that we did as like our, hey, we're going to be taking a summer hiatus for July 4th last year. It's been over a year since we got to talk about a Terrapin Station.
Wow. Since then, I've seen it played live twice. And we've talked about it 0 times. That's wild. We've seen it together since then.
Right. We've talked about Dead and Company Terrapins, but like a Grateful Dead Terrapin.
Yeah. And always this ever a great Grateful Dead Terrapin Station.
Tell me about it.
From the jump, Brent's making his presence known. He's very comfortable with this song, which is great, because the keys are an important part of kind of adding to the texture of what's going on in Terrapin Station. But what we all come to Terrapin for is Jerry. I mean, let's not get it twisted. That's the main event. And his solo beginning at 3:13 is absolutely classic. It has the laid back mood that kind of all but forces you to bob your head. And then starting at like 3:53, Jerry starts to venture down the neck a little bit more for some more adventurous, additions to his bead string that he's working on. It's just great stuff. As dramatic a Terrapin as you would really want. And then also Brent at 6 minutes to 7 minutes ish, just twinkling away and kind of continuing to set that mood of like I almost just said you're a lost sailor traveling toward this Terrapin Station.
Well,
but
just stay tuned.
I know, but it really does feel that way. It feels like an adventure. And I just love this version. Maybe if not for what comes after this, it would have been probably my favorite moment of the show.
Oh, wow. I was not as high on it as you. I think what happened, I'm going to be honest with you. I think I saw it on the set list and I was like, oh my God, we haven't talked about that in so long. And I built it up as this like grand powerhouse. And it's a little slower. It's a little like gentler. And I wanted to have like my face melted off, and that didn't happen on the first listen.
Fair.
I thought that this song was actually like a good metaphor for the bigger show as a whole. Cause this is like the jam in the song is like in the middle.
Yeah.
And kind of what we're getting to is this middle section, this like pre-drums set 2, which is normally like 4 or 5 songs, is 8 songs. So like this Terrapin kind of speaks to a bigger theme of the whole show of like, we're going to get meaty in the middle. and we're going to get weird with it. And it is nice. It's the number 103 Terrapin on Heady version.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I hear what you're saying. Also, having heard Terrapin live twice this summer, there's something about the power of this song when you're in the barn that's tough to match listening on a CD or in headphones.
Yeah, that's right.
It's not to say that it can't be a wonderful listening experience, because I really, as you could tell by my, rapturous praise, I really, really did enjoy this. But there's something about in person, this song, when it clicks, it is as dramatic and as captivating a song as the Grateful Dead play, I would argue. So, anyways, they play Terrapin right into Lost Sailor. Not a particularly noteworthy transition, I didn't think, but they do play it right into it. Lost Sailor debuted on August 4th of 1979. It's also, this song and Saint of Circumstance are back-to-back, the beginning of the B-side of Go to Heaven. They played the song somewhat regularly between the debut in mid-79 through the mid-80s, and then only a few times in 85 and 86 before they retired it for good. So only 145 times played total, Lost Sailor and Saint of Circumstance. I really like this Lost Sailor quite a bit. I'm just realizing right now that I have very few notes on it because I was just really enjoying it a lot. This song and Saint of Circumstance were both stuck in my head all week.
Saint of Circumstance gets stuck in my head like every time I listen to it. The first Dead and Company Saint of Circumstance I ever got was SPAC Night 2 of this year.
Mm-hmm.
And that like guitar riff was in my head for like a month. And not in a bad way. I really enjoyed it. It's just so goddamn catchy. Bob knows what he's doing.
It's an earworm. It really is. It just like wiggles its way into your brain and stays there, because that's the same thing that was stuck in my head. I mean, let's hear it actually right now.
This must be heaven, last station on the line. You must be an angel, honey, what else could be so fine?
Yeah, I mean, the Sailor Saint here is like, what is it, like 13, 12 minutes long, just about. And it's just great stuff. One thing that I never noticed, and I don't know how the hell I didn't notice this before now, is that in Lost Sailor, they reference the Dark Star. And then in Saint of Circumstance, they reference it again. And so it's like, it feels like such a Grateful Dead ass song. Like, obviously it is. Like, Bob Weir and John Perry Barlow wrote it. So, it is as authentically a Grateful Dead song as exists. But that like kind of nod to Dark Star. And they're referencing the Dark Star, like, they're not referencing the song. But to me, I guess just because I've always been so captured by the music that I have not paid super close attention to the lyrics. And then I listened to this Sailor Saint like 7 times in the last week. And so I was more picking up on different things every time I listened. My favorite part of this whole suite, this whole 2-song suite, is the first minute of Saint of Circumstance. I think it's just a real Jerry showcase. And then around 2:15, he takes it to just like another level. His playing is so powerful. And the vocal chemistry between Bob and Brent in Saint of Circumstance, the timestamp that I wrote down is 1:45. It's just great stuff. So overall, I thought that this was a great 1-2 punch, Sailor Saint. What were your thoughts?
I agree with a lot of what you said. My favorite part was a little bit later, the build up to that 3-minute 30-second mark when they launch back into the Saint riff, and then the Bob and Jerry vocal harmony for that like I'm gonna go for it for sure part. That has been stuck in my head all week. I thought the two of them were like excellent on their vocal harmonies the rest of the song. And the masses agreed. Number 85 combo.
Which really, again, to your point about how few songs from this show exist on Heady version, I think really says a lot. And I bet that's going to keep going up and up as people get more familiar with this show and they keep voting it up.
So, yeah. So what comes next is awesome.
Yes, I agree. We have Jam into Drums into Space. Really, really great stuff. And basically 20 plus minutes of very interesting jamming. Do you want to just tackle it all together, or do you want to go bit by bit?
Let's go bit by bit.
All
Let's
right.
break it down a little bit because the jam is not spacey enough to be like a pre-drums space. It's hot enough to be its own thing, which is why I think it's labeled jam.
Yeah.
But it's not like a little, 90-second fool around before they get into drums. It's like
No,
what, 7.5,
it's almost 8 minutes.
8 minutes of just like Jerry getting weird with it in a good way. Like that little noodle walk down he keeps doing throughout
Yeah.
that will like come around later in space too. Just it just was excellent. And the back half of this does feel a little spacey where it gets a little deconstructed, but like the first 3 or 4 minutes of this jam, I was really enjoying.
Yeah, I agree. I also think Phil deserves a shout out because I think he's leading a lot of what they do in that jam and taking them to some exploratory places. His bass sounds wonderful throughout it. Yeah, I
It's
thought this.
also just the idea of it. Like they're improving, they're getting weird.
Yep.
They're not like they're rigid, structured. They never wore this, but like it's not like a corporate Grateful Dead show, right? Like they're gonna go out to space before space. Like they're gonna jam and get weird after some hot saint of circumstance. And I
Yeah.
loved that idea.
I agree. I mean, let's be honest. As they got later into the 80s and 90s, it was more rare that there would be something like this. So this is
Right.
still in the era where they would do an 8-minute jam pre-drums that just captures your imagination and takes you to places that you weren't expecting to go. So this drums gets off to a very interesting start. It's a very acoustic sound in the beginning. I would love to have seen a video of what they were doing on stage because there's almost like some like strumming going on from the sounds of it at the beginning. Did you pick up on that?
I didn't. No.
No?
I got a little bit of a tribal vibe from
Yes.
the drums.
I agree. That's what I mean by like a very acoustic sound. Like it doesn't sound as like I don't want to say like necessarily bongos or congas or something like that, but it's not the sound of like the full grandeur of this drum setup that they have when you look at the stage. Then it gets there. By the mid and end of this 5 minute and 30-second drums, we really do get into the tom pounding fireworks that we're accustomed to in a drums.
Mm-hmm.
But at the beginning, it's much more sparse and, like you're saying, kind of tribal sounding, which is very interesting. And I really liked it quite a bit.
And then we move into a space that builds and builds and builds. And Jerry continues that downward arpeggio, I guess you'd call it, from the jam earlier around the 5 minute mark of space. Like he brings that theme back and they keep building. And then holy shit, this gets hot for a space. Like, is this what 79 spaces are like?
I don't know. I mean, the other one is also pretty good, but I don't think it's as interesting as this one.
Yeah,
the one we get later on this disc. Yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, this is like a hot freeform jam. And then there's like it ends with these swirling, whirling winds, like the destruction has happened and the winds blow the cloud away, and then you're ready to move into the post-space suite. But
yeah,
I was really high on the space.
I agree. In the beginning, and actually all the way throughout, there are cymbals. So that kind of is to your point about like a jam more so than a true space. Like the drummers, or at least one drummer, is still on stage from the sounds of it. And I think that adds to the texture. Whatever Brent's doing sounds great. There's like kind of Pink Floyd-ish sounding guitar tones, I think, in the beginning and middle. But the other like kind of quote that I had in here of like what sound I thought that like was echoing in my head is the Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory scene when they're on that like demonic river cruise. And like there's like whooshing and scary sounds, and there's a video of a chicken getting its head cut off, and it's very intense for a children's movie, or a child's film, as my wife calls them. And then you just get these, like you're saying, these like whooshing deep space sounds at the end. It sounds like the nuclear fallout from Morning Dew is happening on stage right before our very ears. Yeah, it's interesting. So I agree with you. Very compelling space. 7 minutes and 42 seconds long. And I thought it was excellent. What did you think about the Black Peter that they go into after space?
Well, I think we have to tell our Black Peter story from the
I was going to.
summer tour, where we were standing next to a woman in Raleigh who had been to the Charlotte show that I had went to the couple nights before,
and the Atlanta show,
and the Atlanta show, and she was, obviously singing the praises of the Atlanta show, and I was like, yeah, and Charlotte was good too. Like I really enjoyed Charlotte a couple nights ago. She was like, yeah, but they played Black Peter, and Black Peter can suck a dick.
Yeah, she said that, and then she said, worst song ever, Black Peter. And in my head, I was like, that's not even the worst Grateful Dead song.
Right.
Like, get out of here. The worst song ever? That's pretty strong. I was thinking about that exact story when I saw this on the set list, and then when it came on too, I was like, that lady's tight. If she picked up volume 47, she is not thrilled about this song in the set list.
Not happy. Yeah, because it's an 11-minute Black Peter.
Yeah, it's a monster one. 11 minutes and 43 seconds. I liked it. I thought that the singing was particularly soulful, and that the organ from Brent was very tender. I really enjoyed that too. Nice guitar from Bobby, and more kind of subdued bass from Phil. I really loved kind of the overall tapestry that we got from kind of what everyone was doing. And then the solo that Jerry gets into around 10:15 just rules. He's on fire. He's getting ready for I Need a Miracle, which they play after this. And so it's kind of a sharp closeout to a definitively not fiery Black Peter for the first 10 minutes. And then that last 2, they really pick up the pace in a very interesting way, I think.
I completely agree. This Black Peter did not suck a dick.
It did not.
It was pretty good.
So yes, I liked it quite a bit. And then a nice I Need a Miracle afterward, much shorter, only a little bit over 4 minutes long. I like that they broke Black Peter all the way down before they get to this.
Same. And it does make the transition. I don't think it actually makes the transition that clunky on its face, but what we're about to talk about in about 30 to 45 seconds when we wrap up I Need a Miracle, this transition looks bad in comparison to what comes next. But my only other critique for Miracle is Bob is like not there all the time on the mic. And it's not like he's forgetting the words and not singing. Like, I mean, he's not physically next to the microphone, and you can't like hear it come in until like halfway through the lyric. And I think that's because he's like running around the stage having a great time, not because he's like forgetting the words. That's my theory anyway.
I think it's a good theory. When you do hear his voice like loud and clear, it sounds very strong and very good. So I do think that it's a good vocal performance from him, and Brent's backing vocals are excellent too. So a nice vocal performance on I Need a Miracle, and Jerry has a solo that starts around the 3-minute mark that's just wonderful. Very bubbly, very distinctively Jerry. Oh, no, it's okay. So yeah, I just think a very distinctively Jerry solo. And Brent's organ underneath it is great. It kind of turns it all into a very zippy conclusion with Phil driving the train toward Bertha.
Yeah, I don't know. I think Jerry might be driving it. Like Jerry totally winds into the different key out of Miracle, and is like setting the tempo for the drummers. Like, hey, this is how quickly we're playing Bertha. I got that Jerry was driving it more than Phil.
Interesting. Yeah, you could be right. I picked up on Phil in like, I didn't mark down the second mark, but I had that Phil started taking a turn toward Bertha a few seconds earlier. But I don't know if that means a few seconds earlier than the other band members, or maybe my note meant a few seconds earlier than like the track changing on the CD from Miracle to track 4, Bertha. That's probably what I meant. So I will take your word for it that he was the one who was kind of leading the charge, which makes sense because it's his solo that's kind of taking center stage for the last minute and change of this song.
Yeah. Number 75, Miracle on Heady version. So
okay.
Not bad.
Yeah.
And then this Bertha, man, this transition is one of the best I think I've ever heard.
Yeah, that's great.
this miracle to Bertha, which by the way, Bertha to like end a Bertha Good Lovin' combo to end set 2.
Yeah,
That's so weird and cool.
it is.
But like this transition was such a powerhouse.
It was. So Miracle into Bertha is not uncommon. They played that combo 43 times, but it's almost always at the beginning of set 2, not at the end. So that's, to your point, it's so strange to get Bertha into Good Lovin'. Good Lovin' also, they only closed set 2 with that 14 times out of the 500 times they played it. So,
oh my gosh.
Very uncommon set 2 closer. This is a 1 out of 1 set 2 closing sequence, Bertha into Good Lovin' to close out set 2. Never before, never again afterwards. Yeah. Pretty cool. Yeah, this Bertha's great. Like kind of like the deal earlier, just a very fast, zippy pace with just really great jamming. That first Big Jerry solo that ends around 3 minutes. Sorry, it doesn't end around 3 minutes. I thought it was ending around 3 minutes because that's in a typical Bertha. In a typical Bertha, that's where it would end. And instead, he just takes it to a second phase with even higher highs than what he had done before. I thought it was tremendously good. And Brent's organ is extremely triumphant, especially
so good.
Yeah. Right before the Any More breakdown at the end, which is a great end cap to this song, as always. His organ at that part of the song in particular is just spectacular.
I got nothing to add. It was upbeat, roaring along. It was excellent.
Cooking.
Like a cooking Bertha. And they slide right into a Good Lovin'. They don't go to the like normal opening Good Lovin' riff. They bust out something interesting for like 10 seconds before they then like end that measure with the normal Good Lovin' riff into Bob singing.
It reminded me of La Bamba.
That made me like it more. Reminded you of what?
La Bamba by Richie Valens.
Yeah. I didn't put that together till you just said it. But yeah.
So I got so many Richie Valens vibes throughout this song. That intro part, Bob's playing during that part absolutely smokes. And then his playing from like 245 to 307 is when I marked it, is fantastic. And then right after that, Jerry, this is what I wrote in my notes, rips off a La Bamba ass solo. Like his solo sounds very Valens-esque then too. So I don't know, maybe just like another early rock and roll luminary was floating through their mind as they were playing Good Lovin', and they decided to kind of channel Richie. They also channel another old friend, because Bob says at one point, a little ad lib, like a friend of mine used to say, which to me is a shout out to Pigpen during his rap. And I thought that was really, really cool. I mean, it's been 6+ almost 7 years since Pigpen had died at this point in time. And this is obviously a Pigpen song in its heyday. And now it's a Bob song. I love that he gives a shout out to a friend of mine. It's a very subtle thing. And it's really, really actually very sweet, I thought. So I loved this as a set 2 closer. I thought it was a great version of Good Lovin'.
Completely agree. Nothing to add.
The encore was Don't Ease Me In. Man. So, I meant to look up how often they played this as an encore. I'm going to let you go ahead and tell us your thoughts on Don't Ease Me In, and I'm going to look that up.
Unfortunately, my thoughts don't give you enough time, really. My thoughts are just some good, hot, sweet music. That's all I wrote. Because it's just, I mean, they are just moving at, they're not quite as quick as that Bertha. They're moving at a really, really good tempo for a Don't Ease. They're all, singing and belting it out, and they get nice and hot for the encore, and then they say goodnight.
I actually don't have a way of looking that up either, unfortunately. So, it's not meant to be. So Don't Ease Me In strikes me as a bit of an odd encore. And I think that in his Lakeside chat, Dave Lemieux says something to that effect of like, you wouldn't expect to hear this as an encore, but here it is. I thought it was just another Brent banger on the organ throughout this very short song. The Jerry solo that starts at 2:15 gets a chef's kiss from me. Great Don't Ease Me In solo. And some of the tightest drumming of the whole show. Maybe it's that the mix is just exactly right during the song. Maybe it's just that the drummers were locked in. But
well, I think they were locked in going back to I Need a Miracle.
Yeah.
Like I think that they really ended the show on a good place.
A good heater. Yeah. I also like the little announcement that the guy made on stage before they came back out about like maybe they'll come back for an encore if we cheer for them really
Yeah.
loud. Like that was some really kind of nice Midwestern stuff right there. So I thought it was a good end to a good show. I really enjoyed it. It makes me want to explore more of 79 and see more of kind of those early Brent days, what they were doing on some of those silky, crazy nights with a young Brent Midland in the mix. So we are talking about this show, but we're also talking about this release. You want to give some high level thoughts about the Uptown Theater segment? The last 5 tracks on this album are from the Post Space second set on night 2 at the Uptown Theater in Chicago, Illinois on 12/4/79, so less than a week before. That show was partially released on Dave's Picks Volume 31 in 2019, which was the complete show from 12/3, plus just 2 songs, The Estimated Profit into Franklin's Tower from 12/4. So then this is like, oh, well, we know we're never going to release that full show because we've already released parts of it. We've got some extra space on the CD. Let's give you all your money's worth and add some more songs. I thought it was a great segment of music.
Yeah. Just as I beat you to one of the notes to ask for the end of what we do here, you just beat me. I was going to ask you, had the Franklin's Tower from the show ever been officially released? And it has. The Franklin's Tower from the show is very highly rated on Heady Version. It's number 14 for like standalone Franklin's.
Wow.
Yeah. So I was going to ask you that and mystery solved. But high level for what we got here at the end of disc 3, did they mention anything on like the release or social media or even in the liner notes that there was just a little segment from a different show? I don't remember seeing anything about that. So this was like a pleasant surprise to me. Space we kind of, well, I guess I should let you answer the question I just asked you.
Dave talked about it in his like Lakeside chat, like announcing the show. He talked about how they had released part of it on that other Dave's Picks in 2019, and they're excited to release more songs. So that's kind of how I knew it was coming, but I'm not sure how widely it was publicized. No. But go on with what you were saying about the space from 12/4.
Well, we talked about how we both think that the 12/9 space is a little better. This is more like space literally. It sounds like it's being transmitted out of a UAP, which is just what UFOs are called in 2023. I think Phil gets a little weirder in this one with like the aliens theme and the bombs he's throwing out here and there. But I think that the December 9th space is like a better song. And it does have like a song feel and structure to it a little bit, which is weird that a space has any sort of structure.
No, but I hear you. There's a beginning, middle, and an end to that space.
Right. This 12/4 doesn't have any structure. This is just like a proper space. But the 12/9 thing, I think, is just a better song.
I buy that.
And then I don't know about you. I thought the best part of this suite was actually your wife's favorite song. I thought it was Stella Blue.
I liked that, but my favorite part was the US Blues, strangely enough. When I looked at the songs, I thought that my favorite part would either be Stella Blue or Sugar Mag, but I just thought it's actually the opposite for me. I thought that the Not Fade Away was super spirited. I really enjoyed it. And I thought that the US Blues was like a great US Blues. I did like the other 2 songs too. I thought that this was an excellent little 5-song suite to put on here because it just was so enjoyable, the entire part. And I think that this begs the question. It gets us into a question that you like to ask when we have a live release of which of the 3 discs we would save if they were all rolling off a cliff and we could only save one. Which disc would you save? It's tough.
It is tough. I'm conflicted here because this is I can't believe that I find myself saying this. I think I would save disc 1.
Wow.
Yeah, the way your eyebrows shot to the ceiling when I said that. Yeah, I don't know, man. The Minglewood Candyman Lazy Lightning Supplication deal run to end that first disc was really, really tight. And disc where I think you're going with this, that disc 3 is like you would save that, no question. And
I wouldn't. I'd save disc 2.
Oh shit. Okay.
Yeah, I would save disc 2 for the Terrapin Sailor Saint jam. That part for me that's that good stuff. I liked all 3 discs a lot. This was going to be my hot take of this whole episode. This is my favorite Dave's picks in like 2 years.
Whoa. Okay.
Yeah.
That's
We'll,
hot. Yeah.
we'll see. I mean, if it stays on that lofty perch for how much longer it will. But the last Dave's picks that I received that I felt this highly about was Dave's Picks Volume 36, which was at the end of 2019, I guess, when that would have been. That was 2 complete shows from the Hartford Civic Center in 1987. I was very high on that. And then the one afterward, 37, was at William and Mary in 78. And I was like, oh my God, Dave's Picks is the greatest album. There's never been a better series of albums than this ever. And since then, I've enjoyed all of the releases in their own regard. But I will say that this was the first one that I've listened to since those halcyon days of my first 2 Dave's Picks releases, where I got something that was so unexpected and surprising, just because I think I set myself over by not being very familiar with 79. And so it was, kind of untrodden grounds for me. And I loved the early Brent stuff so much. Like you just said, that part at the end of set 1 is so good. The part that I mentioned in the middle of set 2, excellent. The end of set 3, like you were saying earlier, from Miracle through Don't Ease, is great. And then this segment of bonus music from 12/4, it's like that to be like it's not a throwaway part of the release at all, because it's half of the last disc, but for it to be like a tack on bonus portion and to be as good and powerful as it is, it does make me wonder if they could have gotten away with a box set from this tour. I think that they probably could have. So I don't know. I was very, very high on this release.
Wow. Yeah, I was not quite as high as you. I actually found myself comparing this to volume 46 a lot and thinking that 46 stood a little higher. But I think the peaks here peak higher, but I think the overall consistency of the first 2 releases of this year are more consistent.
So higher floors, maybe, but maybe a slightly lower
this
ceiling.
volume 47, I think, has peaks that go above.
There's sustained peaks too. I think that's what's interesting about it, is that it's like a sustained peak of like 4 songs, and then the couple songs where, or like 4 or 5 songs, and then like they take a downbeat, they take a break, a breath, and then it's like another sustained period of like 4 or 5 songs of just absolute heat. I think that that's what makes this such a good and worthy release.
Certainly worthy. Yes.
All right. Well, any final thoughts before we get on our way?
Yeah. Which song would you put on your imaginary playlist?
Sailor Saint, if I can get away with it. I feel like it's fair.
Yeah, you can.
Yeah, I think it's fair. I mean, those songs come as a 1-2 punch at the beginning of the side B of Go to Heaven. Like they are a pair, and so I think it's reasonable to take both. Also, as a combined experience, it's still not as long as even the Terrapin that precedes it. So I don't think that that's egregious to take those 2. And I don't know when I'll have the opportunity to take another Sailor Saint. Like I said, they only played it 145 times. I mean, who knows how long it's going to be before we talk about another show with it. And as we both said, the Saint of Circumstance is just in my head now, as it was in yours. So I'm taking Sailor Saint. What about you?
I'm conflicted here. Backed myself into a corner by picking disc 1. So I'm gonna put my money where my mouth is. And it's the intro to our show. And I don't have one yet. Give me the deal to end disc 1. I'm taking that.
Nice. It's a good pick. We both got some good stuff. I think that we owe some nice shout outs to a couple others while we're on the topic. The Lazy Lightning Supplication easily could have been a pick. I think the Shakedown could have been a pick. The Terrapin could have been one.
I was torn between the deal and the Birth of Good Lovin'.
Yeah. The problem is it's going to be hard for me to give you the Bertha and the Good Lovin'. I understand it.
Yeah.
But it's tough because it's not like a China Rider thing where it's like I said, this is the one time they ended a set with it.
I know, and that's what kind of makes it cooler.
I know. It is tough. So I think that that's going to do it for us. We will be back in 2 weeks with another From the Vault release. We'll go back to another one of our old favorites from past episodes. We haven't talked about which one it's going to be, but I think it'll be something from our first year of shows, just to kind of get something that's more of a throwback. So we'll be back with that, with a new intro in 2 weeks. And then we're going to be away for another couple weeks before we get back into the full swing of things with some exciting new episodes. So stick with us, stay on the bus, and we'll be back. Also follow us on social media. We have not been very active there lately, but we will be again soon. I think that's going to do it. Anything else from you, Dave?
Nothing. Land this plane.
All right. On that note, and until next time, we bid you good night.
And I'll bid you good night. Good night. Good night. And I'll bid you good night. Good night. Good night. And I'll bid you good night. Good night. Good night. That's it. That's it. You got it.